All right, Mr. Chair. Once we hit 6:30, you're able to commence.
Hello, James.
Hello, how are you?
James,
No, can you
is
hear
there
me
any
there?
way you can turn your volume up?
Potentially. I've been having some horrible issues with this all day, so I'm
Okay,
doing my best.
because my aged ears are having a little bit of difficulty. I'll move closer to the my computer.
It's not your ears, unfortunately.
I think so, although, can you hear, Rob? No. How about Lisa? Can you hear? Can you hear James? You've got younger ears than me.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to step in here for James as he's trying to figure out his mic. It's Elizabeth here. We're all set to go. You do have quorum and the YouTube stream has started. So now that it is 6:30, you are able to begin.
Super. Thank you very much. So I'll call this public meeting to order. We have one report on the public meeting, and then I believe we have three issues on the regular agenda. I'm sorry, elections are keeping me up too late, I think. So I will read the notice of collection. Personal information collected as a result of this public hearing and process is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes, which will be available to the public. Questions regarding the collection should be forwarded to the Director of Planning Services. The purpose of public meetings is to present planning applications in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by the applicant, committee members will be afforded the opportunity to ask questions for clarification or further information. The meeting will then be open to the public for comments and questions. Interested persons are requested to give their name and address for recording to the minutes. Interested members of the public can email the committee clerk or the assigned planner if they wish to be notified regarding a particular application. No decisions are made at public meetings concerning applications unless otherwise noted. This public meeting is held to gather public opinion. An exception to this rule is combined reports, which consolidates the public meeting and the comprehensive report. These applications are deemed by staff as straightforward and routine. This business practice has been in place for a number of years and is received by the applicants as efficient customer service and effective use of committee time. Please note that staff use discretion in determining if an application can be a combined public meeting comprehensive report to expedite the approval process. Public meeting reports are provided to inform the public of all relevant information. Information gathered is then referred back to the planning services staff for the presentation of a comprehensive report and recommendations to public committee. This means that after the meeting tonight, staff will be considering the comments made by the public in their further review of the applications. When this review is completed, a report will be prepared making a recommendation for action by the committee. The recommendation is typically to approve with conditions or to deny. The committee then makes a recommendation on the applications to City Council. City Council has the final say on the applications from the city's perspective. Following council decision, notice will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston to the local planning appeal tribunal, but that person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kingston before the bylaw is passed, that person or public body is not permitted to appeal the decision. So we will move to the presentation. I'm sorry, who's the, is there a presenter here? I believe it was, yes.
Mark Tao, sir. Yeah, sorry, I was waiting for the PowerPoint to
No problem.
pop up. All right.
It's a pregnant pause.
Yes, yes.
Go right
All right.
ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. My name is Mark Tao. I'm a registered professional planner with IBI Group, and we're the agent for the owner of 192 Union Street, which is the subject property for tonight's public meeting. The application is for a zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. The zoning bylaw amendment is to enable the redevelopment of the existing 2-unit building to create a 3rd floor, and then to also create a total of 4 dwelling units, 1 on each of the floors of the building. Next slide. The subject property at 192 Union Street is located between Albert Street and Collingwood on the south side of the block. It's a block that's typically residential, some owner-occupied and rental based on local knowledge. It's also the same block where a new Queen's residence was recently approved further to the south. Queen's University main campus is to the west, or to the east, sorry, the next block. And the Union Street corridor offers public transit stops within close proximity. As you can see, there's 2 immediately to the east at the corner of Albert and Union Street. Next slide. The site overall and the lot is pretty typical of the other lots along that same frontage. It's about 380 square meters and about 9 meters of frontage. The lots on this particular stretch all, for the most part, have access to parking through a rear laneway system, which I believe is the same laneway that was accessed for the Queen's residence that you've probably familiar with as well, in terms of how that laneway is used by various owners on that block. The property is within a kilometer of obviously Queen's University, KGH, local parks, on a collector route and Kingston Transit route. Next slide. In terms of the context, it's in a mixed density residential neighborhood with Queen's main campus to the west, or to the east, sorry. There's a grocery store, variances in walking distance west along Union Street, as well as a number of public parks as well. The neighborhood immediately adjacent on the block is a mix of 1 unit up to 6 unit buildings. Immediately across the street, there's a 3 unit and a 6 unit. And then on the corner of Union and Collingwood, there's a 3 unit building. And then there are a few other rentals as well, and multi-unit rentals, and then a number of single detached. So it's quite an eclectic mix in terms of the residential, but all predominantly 2 to 2.5 story built form. Next slide. So the proposal is to, as I said, add an addition to the existing 2-story building to create a total of 3.5 stories. The flat roof would keep it below the height of the building to the immediate left or to the east, which is a large 2.5 to 3-story, 3-floor building. The application with 4 units would increase the density from about 52 dwelling units per hectare to 105. There'd be 1 unit on each floor, including a unit in the basement. And all the units would be accessed directly from Union Street through a common entrance at the front door, the existing front door. There'd be 3 parking spaces in the rear that are accessed by that lane, including 1 Type B accessible space, and then a substantial amount of amenity space in the rear yard as well. Next slide. So the concept site plan here shows the footprint of the existing building, which is not proposed to change. So just to confirm that none of the minimum yards are proposed to be adjusted. The overall height of the building to the peak is anticipated to actually be about the same as well, just converting it to a flat roof. So the footprint stays the same. A rear decking will be added to provide a second form of egress and direct access to the rear yard amenity area, bike parking and vehicle parking, as well as garbage storage. So that the deck off the back will be added for that purpose. And then there'll be sidewalks around each side of the building as well to provide access, easier access to the front and rear for residents. Covered bike parking will be provided in the rear yard, as well as a enclosed garbage and recycling area. And then a direct access to the 3 parking spaces in the rear. And next slide. So with respect to the design of the proposal, the owners and staff we had discussions about how best to work with the existing building. It's already a different architectural style than the predominant style in the block, in that it's a 1970s kind of infill building. So we're not dealing with an original building in terms of comparators to the others on the block, and obviously to the left and right of the building, which are original structures in the neighborhood. So one option was to try to make it appear older. Well, actually 3 options. One is to essentially continue with the same kind of 1970s aesthetic, which wasn't really desirable from anybody's perspective. The other option was to look at making it appear more traditional, perhaps with a mansard roof or a pitched roof with dormers, and shift to red brick or change the appearance to make it appear more traditional. And then the third option that was considered was what's shown in the image here, which is to make it more of a modern look, so that it's clear that it's not a heritage building or a faux heritage style building, but that it's kind of a product of its own time in terms of being a modern addition to the block. So next slide. So as part of the discussions and evaluation of what was appropriate, we looked at the city's design guidelines for residential lots, looked at some of the other examples in Kingston in terms of some modern infill buildings or renovations, additions to traditional buildings. And we concluded that it was an appropriate direction to take in terms of the design aesthetic. The design guidelines for residential lots document from the city supports this type of approach in terms of providing a contemporary urban aesthetic as a contrast to what would otherwise be classified as a traditional streetscape, traditional aesthetic of an area. So again, trying to avoid creating a faux heritage or creating what appears to be an original building when in fact it's not. And so the idea of providing a bit more of a modern aesthetic kind of provides that contrast and highlights what's old and what's distinct about the old original construction versus what's new, and the differences over time as building construction has changed. It also just creates a bit more of an interest in terms of the streetscape character, certainly more so than the 1970s building that's there today, in our opinion. And just to note, as an aside, neither of the buildings, it's not adjacent to a designated building, so neither of the abutting buildings are designated under the Heritage Act. Next slide, please. So supporting studies and plans that were provided included building plans, as well as a planning report, an urban design brief, and then a noise study as well that looked at traffic noise from Union Street, as well as any potential noise sources from HVAC equipment, for example, or air conditioners, etc. And there were no issues identified that were of concern. Because the proposal is for 4 units, it will be subject to site plan control. So as part of that, a bit more detailed engineering will be done in terms of servicing connections if upgrades are needed to existing services, as well as a landscape plan. So that site plan control application will be filed in the near future, likely shortly after the zoning application has been decided upon. Next slide. So we evaluated the application against the provincial policy statement, as well as the official plan and the zoning bylaw. Based on our review of the 2020 PPS, we believe it satisfies the intent of the policies, as it provides redevelopment of an underutilized site in an area that's suitable for intensification and in a way that's compatible with the adjacent development. And next slide. With respect to the official plan, it is designated currently as residential. The density proposed is 105 dwelling units per net hectare, which is technically a high density residential use. So there are policies in the OP about proximity to high density, particularly that it has to be on a collector or arterial road, has to be within walking distance of commercial or convenience commercial uses, amenities such as park spaces, etc. It's on a transit route, and so it meets those policies of the official plan. And the next slide also identifies the other policies of the official plan with respect to compatibility, avoidance of adverse effects through use of mitigation measures, functional needs in terms of adequate amenity space, parking, etc. And so in regards to these policies, we believe it also satisfies the intent, and the zoning bylaw amendment conforms to the policies of the OP. Next slide, please. In terms of the zoning, as with many of the blocks immediately around Queens, it is currently in an E zone, education zone, which typically means that for residential uses, they're subject to A zone requirements. So in the area around on this block, and then in the immediately surrounding blocks where redevelopment has happened, such as across the street, several of the lots across the street have been rezoned. They've typically been placed into a site-specific B zone, where they've been three or more dwelling units. So 171 Union Street, 195 Union Street, and the property in between those two, they are similarly zoned. So we propose the same site-specific B zone to allow the 4 units. The next slide. So the B zone would address 7 particular provisions. So 2 of them are existing non-compliances, which is the side yards. So the minimum side yard on either side, and then the aggregate side yard. So those, as I said, are not proposed to change. The density is increased to 105 dwelling units per net hectare for the 4 units. The parking requirement, we're reducing it from 4 spaces to 3 spaces. So 4 would be 1 space per unit. And because of the proximity to campus, services, amenities, transit route, etc., the 3 parking spaces for the 4 units were determined to be suitable. An accessible parking space is technically required once you get to 4 units. So the proposal is anticipating having a type B space, which is the narrower of the 2 spaces. The type A is typically wider and type B is a bit narrower. So we do have a bit of a limitation in terms of lot width. So we could provide a type A space, but then that would reduce our parking supply to only 2. And we thought it better to provide 3 because we still are able to provide the loading aisle beside the type B space, which would give it quite an additional width, an extra 1.5 meters. So we anticipate that would probably be a better use of the space in the lot, and still would provide a functional, accessible space with a loading aisle. And then parking design standards are proposing a reduction to the width, just to allow for those 3 spaces and the loading aisle to fit on the 9-meter wide lot. And then some relief for the projections, just for their rear yard decks, because of their projection out into the rear yard. The side yards where they extend it, or they extend out parallel to the building of the wall, the bylaw just has to mimic the minimum side yards for the building as well. So based on our review, we believe the proposed zoning is appropriate and compatible with adjacent uses, and is supportive of a mix of housing types and options in the area, and is appropriate for the site. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, we believe the amendments are consistent with the PPS, conform to the official plan, and are compatible with the surrounding land uses. I'll note that we had one reach out from an immediate neighbor, and the owner and the designer had an opportunity to meet and talk with that neighbor, and they were happy with the design. Their concern had been about the height of the building, the additional floor, and particularly because of the flat roof of the proposal, it means that there'll be the building will be a bit lower, and that it also won't necessarily block sunlight, for example, from coming into the side windows of the upper floor of the adjacent use. So other than that, we were pleased that the design seemed to have been well accepted from the immediate neighbors. So if you have any questions, happy to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you. I will turn to our planning staff to answer the couple of usual questions. Oh, if you could unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Walid Al-Baqi. I'm a planner with the city. I'm just going to touch upon the public notification. So notification for the public meeting was completed in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act. So on-site signage was provided. Notices were sent by mail to neighbors living within 120 meters, and a notice was placed in the local newspaper. We received one phone call before the date of the public meeting, and it was mainly about the building height, like more clarifications. These clarifications, along with any future public comments, will be addressed in the future comprehensive report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And have we received any correspondence or calls regarding the application?
So the one, Mr. Chair, the one we received was actually before the public meeting was scheduled, but after the public meeting was scheduled, we didn't receive any feedback.
Thank you very much.
So any feedback in the future will be included in the comprehensive report, as well as how it's gonna be addressed.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. So I will now turn to the committee. Are there any questions regarding the application?
Mr. Chair, it's James. I'm just
Thank you,
wondering if can
Councillor
hear me.
Hutchison.
Thank you. Just one question is regarding the zoning. Do we know what the original intent of the zoning bylaw, special education and medical uses was? What was the purpose there? Since we're going to change it, I'd like to understand more about it.
I can answer this, and the staff want to chime in, they can as well. So through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, good question. So the blocks immediately surrounding Queen's campus have historically been in an E zone, education zone, and then that specific zoning allows for what you would expect in terms of university type buildings and uses. And then it also says that residential uses are permitted in accordance with the A zone, which is typically 1 and 2 unit dwellings. But as we've seen intensification around the campus areas, the E-zone has been changed a number of times for site-specific proposals, and either left in the E-zone and a site-specific E-zone was established, or put into a site-specific B-zone, such as is proposed here. So it was, the E-zone is intended to reflect kind of an intention or allowance of potential Queen's University uses on the surrounding blocks of the main campus, and then a residential use as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Osanek. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I did. All right, through you, Mr. Chair. I have some questions. Each one of these units will have, or each one of these bedrooms will have a washroom. So is that 12 washrooms in this new building? Is that right?
Just a moment, and let me double check here. Yeah, so it's, yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so one full bathroom per bedroom is what's proposed.
All right, thanks. So I guess that's why the servicing plan, or that's when in the servicing plan it'll be determined if the the sewer capacity can handle 12 washrooms. How many, do we know how many washrooms are in the existing building right now?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, I don't know off the top of my head. Oh, and the owner is corresponding with me here, so helping me answer some of these questions. So if you give me a moment, he might chime in.
Thank you.
I would hazard a guess, while we're waiting, I hazard a guess it's certainly probably less than one per bedroom. Oh, okay, he says 4. So there's currently four bathrooms for 2 units currently. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just know that the concern that for secondary suites in that Sydenham district area has always been if the servicing capacity can handle it. And this is now 12 washrooms instead of 4 washrooms. But being a Queen student, I would have loved to have had my own washroom when I lived on Livingston Avenue. So I know that all the students or whoever moves into these units, whoever it is moving into the units, would appreciate 1 washroom per bedroom. So that's great. Sign me up. My second question is, thanks for answering that. My second question is, in our report, page 41, it shows a schematic diagram of the south elevation, and it shows all of the fire escapes. And I think that makes the south elevation view look really busy. And I know this is probably more site plan, so it's just more to keep in mind when site plan comes along. But if there's any way to make all that railing not so visible, I'm thinking about Westbrook Meadows. We had a lot of places that were done up as sort of secondary suites. And when you look at the backyard of the homes in amongst it, and Councillor Chappelle would be able to verify this, it's just the backyard view just looks so busy because it's just nothing but wooden staircases down. It takes away from the aesthetics of the entire neighborhood. All the neighbors complain for those homes that were built with all that extra wood. So maybe if it was wrought iron, like black or gray wrought iron, it would more blend in with the building. Just something to keep in mind, because with me looking at that south elevation, and these homes are, like 3, almost 4 stories, right? Because you have the elevation from the high basement. It's just going to be a lot of wood staircase if that's the intent. I don't know if the applicant has any comments on what the south elevation view would look like.
Yeah, I can actually surf it over to Mac Gervin, who's the designer for it, and I think James can unmute Mac there.
Go ahead, Mac.
Okay, good. Okay, you haven't put your face up, but that's fine. Well, part of it was having fire exits off the back, so that there'd be, certainly a safer issue in that sense. And also feel that the people, for the most part, a lot of people will also enter from the back, as that's where their cars parked or their bicycles are parked. I sort of imagine the railing as being, certainly metal spindles, which keeps it much lighter. The wood rails, it does look a little beefy here, but I think if you go to black iron spindles, the wooden rails, in my experience, really cuts down that bulkiness. It is around behind the house, obviously, and there's that huge Queens residence going right next door to it. But one thing else I'd like to add in is that all the talk's sort of all been about the outside of the place. Just one thing about the inside. One is that the owner is planning on completely gutting the place. So there's going to be proper insulation, proper plumbing, proper electrical. In terms of our environmental sustainability goals in the city, it's going to make a big difference in terms of how this house works. And big upgrades in terms of the quality of the cabinetry that to get tenants who will take care of the place. So that's just another aside. But I think the background could be fine if it went to black metal spindles. It is a lot of steps for sure. But again, I think that the rear exit is important.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, thank you, Mr. Tao, for the presentation. I just had a question about accessing the parking. In the schematics, it didn't really show where the cars come from. And I know one of the other overhead diagrams in our package showed an alleyway, it looks like, but then when you went to the Google Street View or whatever the actual image was, it didn't really look like there was a road for cars to access there. So how do cars get to the back parking?
Good question. So through you, Mr. Chair. So there is a laneway that comes in off of Albert Street, and that's the current situation. There's parking in the rear there, along with a number of other properties. If you go along that block of Union Street, sorry, you'll see that none of those houses have driveways, so everybody gets a laneway. In my presentation, slide 14, or some of the earlier slides, shows some of that lot fabric. So all of those lots along Union Street and as well on Collingwood there actually have access to that laneway, in Albert as well. So it's the same laneway, I believe, that was the subject of some contention with the Queen's residents. So
I believe you're right.
It's there. It's there's some issues, but yeah. It's that one, and that's how they currently access it as well.
All right, and one more question through you, Mr. Chair. Is that city maintained, that laneway? I forget, because you're right, Mr. Howe, it did come up recently, but I forget if that's a city responsibility.
Yeah, I think to the best of my knowledge and what the owner has said is that they believe it's owned by Queen's University. And just from what I know, the use of it in terms of maintenance has been by Queen's as well historically, according to the owner's experience, that Queen's has gone through there and cleared it. But yeah, there's some ongoing discussions, I think, related to the residents. But as far as historically, it seems that Queen's has been the one who's maintained it.
Okay, thank you.
So you, Mr. Chair, I can add to this. So yes, he's as far as we know, it's being maintained by Queen's, and everyone, like every property that has an existing access to the lane, will maintain the access. That's why it's being proposed for the site as well.
Take the chair and recognize you.
Chair, Councillor Kiley.
I do, and I recognize you.
Yeah, you asked the same questions I was about to ask. I know that this has come up, and Queen's remedied it with all the adjoining property owners by saying that they would recognize the ongoing rights of access of those adjoining properties, and they would maintain the maintenance of the laneway. I would really appreciate, Mark, if you could get that in writing by the time the comprehensive report comes back. because that's a really important question. And I'm not sure if Queens had anticipated the full laneway right to the end being continued to be maintained by them. So if you could confirm that, that'll save me asking this question again in a few months' time.
All right, that sounds, will do.
Thank you very much. So, do you want to return the
The chair back.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak to this? If the clerk could, I don't have everybody on my screen. Is there anybody who would like to speak to this?
Hello, Mr. Chair. It's James. I tried calling in on my phone, so hopefully you can hear me okay.
I can hear you loud and clear.
There is one member of the public, and I would ask that they use the raise hand tool located in the bottom right-hand corner if they wish to speak and address the committee. Mr. Chair, it does not appear that a member of the public wishes to speak to this matter.
Okay. Oh, did Mac? I saw Mac just flash on.
No.
No? Okay. Thank you very much. If there's no further members of the public, I'll return to the committee if there's any additional questions that have popped into mind. If not, I'll declare this public meeting completed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll now turn to our regular meeting. And I'll call the meeting to order. Approval of the agenda with the addendum we received. If there's a mover, thank you, Councillor Sanik. Seconder, Councillor Hutchison. All those in favor? Carried. Confirmation of minutes from our October 15th meeting. We've all received them. Is there a mover and a shaker? Councillor Hutchison, Councillor Osanek. Councillor Kiley must be saving his strength. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. I don't believe we have any delegations, nor do we have briefings. I'll read this short business statement. This portion of the meeting is open to the public. The meeting has initiated a new process in which members of the public will have the opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on comprehensive reports presented before the Planning Committee. Those wishing to provide oral comments at this meeting will be invited to do so. If a person or public body would otherwise have an opportunity to appeal the decision of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston to the local planning appeal tribunal, but that person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kingston before the law is passed, that person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. So our first file tonight is 262 Wellington Street, and it's an application for a zoning bylaw amendment. Applicant is the Boulevard Group. Who would like to speak to this?
I'm going to speak on behalf of the city, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Wicca. I'm a senior planner with the City of Kingston. So the property in question is 262 Wellington Street. Next slide, please. So the purpose and effect of this application is to amend the zoning of an existing mixed-use building, which currently contains 2 residential units on the 2nd floor and a dentist's office on the ground floor and basement, to permit the multi-use residential use of this property instead, with additional residential units incorporated through the conversion of the commercial and storage space, which is currently on the first floor and in the basement, the space below the second floor and also to provide the associated zoning relief with this application. Next slide, please. So the property in question is located just north of Barrack Street. It's effectively across from the Food Basics parking lot just north of the downtown. So this is considered part of the northern part of the central business district. Next slide, please. The picture on the top left is the subject property. The picture on the top right is some of the properties that back onto the subject property. It's a mix of residential uses and limited commercial along Rideau Street. The picture on the bottom left is Wellington Street looking north of the site, and directly across from the building in question is on the bottom right. Next slide, please. The site is designated Central Business District in the official plan. Next slide, please. And the current zoning for the land is C1, and we're proposing to have a site-specific C1-53 zone. Next slide, please. So this is the site plan for the proposed development. Again, this is a building actually that has heritage value, but nothing is being proposed to change on the outside of the building. All the changes are proposed to be internal, so that will retain the heritage character of the building. There is an easement along the west side of the site, which has been an encumbrance in terms of the provision of parking, and it does limit some of the elements of the site. And as you can see, it's mostly developed, so there's limited available space for additional amenity. Next slide, please. To date, there has been no correspondence received for this application. Next slide, please. So the zoning provisions that are being sought, for which the relief is being sought, are the amenity area. As I mentioned earlier, there's very little outside space. However, interior to the units, there is a living area that's going to be dedicated for amenity. There isn't any off-street parking available. As you can see from the site plan, the existing commercial and the existing two dwelling units had no on-site parking due to an easement along the south side of the property. Similarly, there's not any room or potential for accessible parking. Next slide, please. There is bicycle parking being provided beyond the requirements of the zoning bylaw. As there are two spaces existing already, then the requirements were for 3 bicycle spaces, and 4 are being proposed. There was a request previously to see if that could be increased so that there was 1 per unit, but we did look at a number of options, and there simply isn't the amount of space required for bicycle parking spaces, which is actually also evidenced by the fact that the spaces are actually being reduced slightly in size in order to accommodate more spaces. The permitted uses currently on this site allow for multi-unit residential dwellings. However, the units in this zone are not currently permitted as of right to have residential units at the first floor and ground floor, effectively below the second floor. And so that is part of the relief being sought. And in addition to that, the maximum density of the site is being sought to be increased from the permitted 123 residential units to 180 residential units. Next slide, please. So in summary, the proposed conversion of this building, the existing building, into additional residential units from the dental office, the commercial space, and the storage space in the basement, we believe is appropriate and adds to the range of dwelling units available in the area. And it adds and contributes to the total residential density within the urban boundary. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment complies with the PPS and the official plan, and we feel it constitutes good land use planning, so we recommend approval of the application for the zoning bylaw amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now turn to the committee if there are any questions, and we'll save the comments until the second half, but if there are any questions, now would be the time to ask. And I believe this is, if I'm not mistaken, Councillor Hutchison's district, so he may indeed have some questions. Or seeing none, I will open it up to the public. and then we'll look for a mover and a seconder after the public. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak?
Mr. Chair, one member of the public remains in the gallery. I would ask you to raise hand tool if they wish to speak. It does not appear that they wish to speak, so we can proceed.
Thank you very much. So we'll go back into the committee. Are there any comments that people would like to make? If you could take over the chair, just very briefly.
I recognize you.
Thank you. My quick comment is normally I would be whining about the fact that there's no on-site parking. However, when this was a restaurant, I visited it often, probably too often. And the nice thing is that there was always available parking because of the lot across the street. And any tenants there, I'm sure, would be able to get a permit that would allow them to park right across the street. So it wouldn't have an impact on adjoining properties. So I, on this instance, don't have an issue with parking at all. So that's all I have to say. I
returning the chair to you.
Thank you. And I should have asked for a mover and a seconder before I started gabbing. Moved by Councillor Kiley, seconded by Councillor Hutchison. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. We'll now go on to the second business item, and that's 1024 Portsmouth Avenue. And it's Jana Johnson, and it's represented by Fotan Consulting.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair. I'll be speaking on behalf of the city this evening and staff's recommendation. My name is Sonia Bolton. I'm a senior planner with the city's Planning Services Department. I'm here this evening to present the staff recommendation for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 1024 Portsmouth Avenue. The public meeting for this application was held a couple of months ago on September 3rd. Next slide, please. So the purpose and effect of the application is to rezone the property to permit a third residential unit to be installed in the basement of the existing building. No new construction is proposed on the site, and there previously actually had been a third unit in the basement, but the owner did remove it a couple of years ago when they were notified by the city that the third unit was not permitted under the current zoning. Next slide, please. So the property is located at the north end of Portsmouth Avenue. It's in the northwest corner of the Strathcona Park neighborhood. There are residential uses to the north, east, and south, including some similarly designed buildings, some of which do have 3 units in them and have been rezoned to allow 3 units. To the west, there is a portion of the Rideau Trail and the Little Cataraqui Wetland Complex. Next slide, please. So the site in question has an area of approximately 937 square meters and just under 16 meters of frontage along Portsmouth Avenue. It's currently developed with a 2-story dwelling, and access to the basement unit would be via a pathway along the side to the rear of the property. Next slide, please. The property, back one, please. We skipped the official plan. That's odd, there's no picture showing. Okay, apologies, I'm not sure why that didn't turn out in the slide, but the property is designated both residential and environmental protection area. The building, the existing building itself, where the third unit is proposed to be located, is within the residential designation. Therefore, there was no official plan amendment required as part of this application. Next slide, please. So the existing zoning for the property is in the A5 zone of zoning bylaw 8499, which permits 1 and 2 dwelling units. So there is a proposed site-specific B zone to permit the 3 units, like some of the other properties in the area. The environmental protection or EPA zone is to remain. The line is going to be amended to, as you see here, to reflect the floodplain that was shown on the geodetic survey that the owner had done and had approved through the Conservation Authority. The site-specific zone will recognize the aggregate side yard for the existing building and will require a 6-meter setback to the floodplain. The two exceptions to that is the site-specific zone also acknowledges that a portion of one parking space will be within that 6-meter setback, as well as one accessory structure less than 10 square meters in area. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is just a copy of the concept plan here provided by the applicant. Again, there is no new construction proposed. They show the location of the existing building on the site, the front and side and rear pathways, and then the 3 proposed parking spaces on the property. Next slide, please. So in terms of public correspondence, we only had one piece of correspondence and one inquiry regarding the property, and that was an email of support from one of the neighboring property owners. I believe that correspondence was circulated to the members of the committee through the addendum today that was provided by the clerk's office. There was also a few comments from the planning committee members from the public meeting that was held a couple of years ago. So I'm just going to briefly address the 3 comments that were raised. One had to do with egress from the basement windows. So if the zoning bylaw amendment is approved, the applicant is going to be required to apply to the city for a building permit. And through that process, that will ensure that all of the windows and doors and everything within the unit does comply with the requirements of the building code. The second question that had been raised was whether or not, because of the size of the rear yard, if all of the parking could be provided, or at least some of the parking provided in the rear yard of the property. So the concern there is the amount of space in the rear yard that is part of the EPA or the environmental protection area. So staff did speak with the staff at the Conservation Authority. They didn't have a concern with there being parking in the rear yard. Their concern was with any alterations to the grade or to the drainage, so they wouldn't permit that. And currently what exists in the rear yard is just a grassed lawn area. So in order to make that into a stable enough surface to allow parking, you would have to bring in fill and gravel and other materials. And it is unlikely that that would be supported by the Conservation Authority because there would need to be a permit under their regulation as well for that. So for that reason, that is why the applicant has not pursued that option. The third and final comment was about the tandem parking in the driveway. And if we could just go back one slide, please. I just want to use the concept plan to illustrate the conversation. So certainly, I think the reason the issue of the tandem parking was raised because there are logistical issues sometimes when it comes to different tenants having parking spaces that are parked in tandem. So when staff were reviewing this, with the applicant and their agent, we went through a number of things that we discussed. And so for the first is that the zoning bylaw does permit tandem parking. Now that is specific to properties that have second residential units. This case, they are seeking permission for a 3rd unit, but the tandem parking arrangement is specific to just 2 of the spaces. So it is similar in that nature. And when an applicant submits a concept plan like this, they are required to show the specific legal parking spaces, but the zoning bylaw also allows parking within a driveway that leads to a legal parking space. So in terms of what is proposed here, they're the full-size parking spaces in an existing driveway, which is also, the existing driveway is sort of a generous enough size. So in terms of doing another site visit and looking at the way in which the tenants themselves may actually use the spaces, it's likely that that second parking location will park a little further back, allowing some room for cars to maneuver around each other on the site. So for that reason, staff felt that the current arrangement proposed by the applicant in this situation for this property is sufficient to meet the parking needs on the site. If we can move ahead 2 slides, please. So staff do feel that the proposal to add the third unit to the existing building is appropriate, as it adds to the range of the built form and the dwelling unit sizes that are available in the area. It contributes to increasing the residential density within the urban boundary, and that the proposed amendment complies with the provincial policy statement and the official plan and constitutes good land use planning. So therefore, staff are recommending approval of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for the property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the committee and then we'll go to the public. So are there any questions or comments from the committee? Yes, Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Bolton. Quick question. It's fairly high level, but when I was reading through the report, I didn't see any mention of secondary suites. I was wondering if this would have been a good candidate for some of the new secondary suite policy that we passed last year. And what I guess I'm wondering why we need a bylaw change to provide for something that I thought maybe another policy could.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes. So currently, the secondary suite policies are intended only for the addition of a second unit to an existing one dwelling unit. This is the addition of a third. So there have been some changes at the provincial level that have changed some provincial policy, taking the language of second residential units to additional residential units, and which we think the intent is to allow more than two. As a municipality, we have not yet done sort of the review to see what we can accommodate. When we did the review for the second residential units, there was quite a bit of work involved with Utilities Kingston, for instance, to ensure that we had adequate servicing throughout the municipality to allow additional units on properties. So currently, because this is proposing a third unit where only two are permitted, unfortunately, that sort of necessitated going the route of the rezoning in this instance.
No, fair enough. Thank you. That clarifies it. And I do think maybe I had the provincial policy in mind, because I remember not that long ago, even after we passed the secondary suite policies, there's discussion about maybe even adding carriage houses in a place where there are two units already. So essentially a third. So maybe I was kind of conflating those two. So thanks for clarifying.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll turn to the public. Mr. Clerk, are there any hands raised?
Hello, I'd once again ask that the member of the public raise their hand if they wish to participate. Mr. Chair, I don't see any interest in participating at this time, so I'll let you proceed.
Thank you very much. I will now return to the committee. If we have a mover and a seconder for this, moved by Councillor Kiley, seconded by Councillor Osanek. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll quickly go to Councillor Kiley and make a couple of quick comments.
Take the chair.
Anytime that somebody comes to planning in an attempt to legalize what had been at one time or is currently an illegal secondary, in this case tertiary suite, I've always been supportive of it for a couple of reasons. One, it means that we're assured that it's going to be rebuilt as to meet all of building code standards. So it's going to be soundproofed, it's going to have egress, and it's going to be better fireproofed as well. The problem in the old days, in my old days, in the 90s in Sydenham and now in Williamsville, is that often illegal secondary suites were dangerous. And by allowing us to legalize these, it allows us to ensure that they're built properly and safely. So I'll be voting in support of this. Thank you.
I yield the chair.
Great. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried. We're a very unanimous group tonight. Thank you very much. I'll move on to our Second last issue, which is 652, 670 Princess Street and 551 Victoria Street. And it's a request to condominiumize a property that's already gone through all of the planning process and is indeed now being built. So who would like to speak to this file?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of Planning Committee, staff, colleagues, and members of the public. My name is Lindsay Lambert, and I'm a planner with the city's Planning Services Department. And I'm participating in the meeting this evening to present the staff recommendation for an application for final plan of condominium for a property located at 652 to 670 Princess Street and 551 Victoria Street. Next slide, please. The subject lands are located in the Williamsville area of the Princess Street corridor on the south side of Princess Street between Victoria to the west and Nelson Street to the east. Next slide, please. This is the approved site plan drawing for the development, which consists of a 10-story mixed-use building with 325 residential units, 14 ground floor commercial units. The project is currently under construction and includes the restoration and adaptive reuse of the limestone building at the corner of the site near Victoria Street. And the limestone building is located on a parcel that has listed status in the city's municipal heritage register. Next slide, please. The purpose of this application this evening is to establish a condominium exemption under Section 9(6) of the Condominium Act. Like I said, the condominium would be comprised of a 10-story mixed-use building, 325 residential units, and 14 commercial units. And there is an existing site plan control agreement that's been registered on title of the subject lands. Next slide, please. There have been a number of previous applications for the site leading to the application before you this evening. There was an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment approved by council in July of 2018, which established the site-specific land use framework for the site. The site remains designated Main Street Commercial in the official plan and was included as a new site-specific policy area. The zoning for the site was amended to a special holding C4557 zone. Community benefits were collected as part of that set of approvals. And subsequent to that, the applicant met the requirements to request a removal of the holding symbol for the site, and that was approved by council on April 16th of 2019. And in October of 2019, final site plan approval was issued for the site. Also of note is that the applicant did enter into a heritage easement agreement with the city prior to the site plan being approved to protect and ensure the ongoing maintenance of the significant heritage attributes of the site, of the building. Next slide, please. The key policies of focus for a final plan of condominium application are found in section 9.6 of the official plan, 9.6.20, subsection A, the plan of condominium, the proposed units, and the common elements are appropriate for the intended purpose and meet all the requirements of the zoning bylaw, Ontario Building Code, and the property standards bylaw. The staff can confirm that that is the case. The condominium meets all the requirements of the site plan control bylaw. Staff can confirm that that is the case as well, and that the plan of condominium meets the requirements of the parkland conveyance bylaw. And appropriate parkland conveyance was collected in accordance with the municipal bylaw as well as the Planning Act through the site plan control application. Next slide, please. Staff can confirm that no public correspondence has been received to date with respect to the application. Next slide, please. And the recommendation is found on page 164 of the agenda. The proposed condominium conversion is consistent with the provincial policy statement, the official plan, with the site plan agreement registered on title. And the recommendation is to for council and the planning committee to approve the exemption under the Condominium Act and to authorize, subject to the satisfaction of the Director of Legal Services, for the mayor and clerk to be authorized to execute the condominium agreement, and for legal services to forward the plans and the agreement to the Land Registry Office for registration. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I will turn to the committee if there are any questions or comments before we go to the public, and then we'll open it up for a mover and a seconder. Seeing none, are there any members of the public who wish to speak?
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to jump in here to let you know that we no longer have any members of the public with us tonight.
So that answers that question very quickly. Thank you very much. I will now turn back to the committee for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Hutchison, Councillor Kiley. Any further questions, comments? I have one very quick comment.
I take the turn.
Thank you very much. Just really quickly. There are two reasons I love condominiums, although I've never been able to afford one. The one reason is that they operate like a rich person's co-op. I have a couple of condominiums in my district, and they take care of issues internally. And so there's very little kind of complaints to the city for a lot of reasons. The other reason, and there's no members of the public, so I can say this, I don't have to whisper it, condominiums pay more taxes. And that helps keep residential taxes a little bit lower. And so for those reasons, condominiums are good. So thank you.
Yield the chair.
Thank you. Mover and a seconder we have, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you very much. I'll declare this portion of the meeting over, and we'll turn to our final report, which is for another condominium, Kingston Empire Developments Limited, and it's at 673 Innovation Drive. Who would like to speak to this? I see Lindsay is still there.
Good evening, Mr. Chair.
Hi.
Different planner for this one. My name is, well, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, members of the public watching on YouTube as well. My name is Mike Slaggy. I'm a planner with the Planning Services Department, presenting the staff recommendation regarding the final plan of condominium for a 3,600 square meter industrial building containing 13 units located at 673 Innovation Drive. Next slide, please. So the site is located in the east end of the city in the St. Lawrence South community. Next slide. More specifically, the 1.08 hectare site is located in the St. Lawrence Business Park on the south side of Innovation Drive at the intersection of Discovery area. Next slide, please. The development is well under construction, nearly done with construction. This picture was from this past weekend. It is being taken from Innovation Drive looking south toward development. Next slide, please. The site is designated business park industrial within the Rito Community Secondary Plan, where that designation permits a range of non-residential uses, including limited to research and development activities, offices, warehousing, and commercial uses that serve the business industrial area. Next slide, please. The site is zoned business park zone BP-1 in bylaw 32-74, which covers the area of Pittsburgh Township. And in line with the official plan designation, this zone permits a broad range of non-residential uses, such as financial institutions, business offices, commercial schools, manufacturing plants, and service shops and warehouses. An approved site plan for the lands confirmed that all regulations and performance standards applicable to the site were met by development. Next slide, please. As mentioned, there was a site plan control application, which was initially submitted in December 2014. Ultimately approved in April 2019 and registered the following month in May of 2019. Next slide, please. This is just showing the approved site plan, which was registered on title as part of the agreement, showing the layout and regulating the building size, location, functionality of the site, access, circulation, servicing, lighting, and landscaping. Next slide, please. Also registered with the agreement, here are the elevations for the development, again showing just the facade, placement, treatment, and location of the bay doors. Next slide, please. So the purpose and effect of the present application is to establish condominium comprised of 13 units, as well as common elements including shared ownership and maintenance of the surface parking area, access aisles, landscape areas, utilities, and underground services, as well as ultimately registration of the condominium plan and condominium agreement. Next slide, please. This is just showing the proposed plan of condominium and plan and elevation. This was included as Exhibit F in the staff report. Next slide, please. No public correspondence has been received to date on this application. And next slide, please. Ultimately, as noted in the planning report, the staff recommendation is the committee recommend approval of the application and forward to council for the consideration. The approval will be conditional upon the owner entering into a condominium agreement with the city, which would ensure notification of the conditions of site plan agreement and any future present or future owners, and informing them of their responsibilities with regard to site maintenance and on-site works, as well as authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute the condominium agreement included as part of the staff report, subject to the satisfaction of the Director of Legal Services. And finally, the Director of Legal Services will be authorized to forward the stamped original plan condominium to the registry office for registration. That concludes the presentation. Thank you, and available for any questions.
Thank you very much. I will turn to the committee. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I will ask again, although I don't believe there's any members of the public remaining, but if there is any member of the public that would like to speak to this, now would be the time.
Mr. Chair, there are no members of the public that wish to speak.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'll turn back to the committee. Who would like to move and who would like to second the recommendation? Councillor Hutchison, Councillor Sanik. Any comments regarding this? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Carried. We've had a very unanimous night. Thank you very much, everybody. We have no other business. We have any comments on correspondence we may have received? Seeing none. Date and time of the next meeting, Thursday, November 19th at 6:30 p.m. And I doubt if I can promise you as smooth a night as we had tonight, but I appreciate that. So it's time to turn the sound back on my TV and watch Biden win the election, I believe. Anyway, we shall see. Thank you very much. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Osanek, Councillor Kiley, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much.